This section of notes, we're going to be looking at the physical geography, the climate, and the vegetation. I want to start off with the physical geography. Number one, plateaus, highlands, and mountains. Remember from the previous unit that the Sahara Desert is just north of this area, and the Sahara Desert has been a barrier to travel and migration from northern Africa as well as from Europe into this sub-Saharan Africa. Because the Sahara is the world's largest desert, it has been a barrier, again, to travel and migration. Seen from space, Africa looks like a series of different steps. The edges of the continental plateaus are marked by what's known as escarpments, which are steep, often jagged slopes or cliffs. You have rivers crossing the plateaus that plunge suddenly down the sides of these escarpments in what is known as cataracts, which are towering waterfalls. There's relatively few mountains in this area, even though for the most part, most of the elevation of sub-Saharan Africa is pretty high. You do have, and I'm going to draw that with my pen here, the eastern highlands region of this area. You've got this area that has some mountains in it, which includes part of the Ethiopian highlands on this map. And then you've got the Rwenzori mountain range, which is kind of hard, doesn't even really show it on this map, but it's what's in red. There are some other ones in this map, the Drakensberg range that are here. Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest peak of this area, you can see that here. But for the most part, not a whole lot of mountains in this area. Now moving on to the Great Rift Valley. The Great Rift Valley stretches from Syria in the greater Middle East down to Mozambique in this area. A rift valley is a large crack in the Earth's surface formed by tectonic forces. This map here in the top right corner is a good map to look at. It shows you shaded in red where the Great Rift is, but then you can see these lakes that are created by the Great Rift Valley from these depressions because of these tectonic forces. They make for a very beautiful landscape, but it's kind of scars in the Earth's surface here in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, sub-Saharan Africa is sometimes known as a land of lakes, because you can see on this map, there's a lot of different lakes. Most of the region's lakes are on or near the Great Rift Valley in this area here. Some of these include Lake Victoria, which is the largest lake in sub-Saharan Africa. You've got Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, and then some other lakes that are dotted in other parts, Lake Chad, Lake Volta. But there's a lot of different lakes in sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is also known for its river basins. The Niger River, one of the most important rivers in this region, you can see that here in this area. It's the main artery of Western Africa. It's important for agriculture and transportation. You also have the Zambezi River. It meets the ocean at the Victoria Falls, which plummets 355 feet. You've also got the Congo River, which reaches the sea through what's known as an estuary, or a passage where freshwater meets seawater. And then also, sub-Saharan Africa, natural resources. There's an abundance of mineral resources in sub-Saharan Africa. Gold, iron ore, manganese, and zinc are especially abundant. Water is also an abundant resource in this area. Northern Africa is known for its deserts and lack of water. Sub-Saharan Africa is known for its lakes and the abundance of water, as well as rivers. Now, just because there's abundance of water does not mean that you have really big industrial-type farms in this area, because you don't. You have a lot of subsistence farms, and you would think, because of all the rivers, that we've got hydroelectric power all over the place, but you don't, because development is not there. Solar energy is also a natural resource that has been harnessed in this region, but sub-Saharan Africa, definitely important to remember it for its natural resources. Now moving on to climate and vegetation. Probably one of the most important sections in sub-Saharan Africa because it's so diverse. One of the main things to look at here, the primary influence of climate in this region is latitude and wind systems. That's going to be the determiner of a lot of different climates in this area. Because of the variations in climates, which you can see here, there are many different biomes found here. Because there's a lot of different biomes, you have a lot of people that are living off of the land because the land can provide an abundance. Now, first type of climate I want to look at, and probably the most abundant, is the tropical climate. That's your pink shades you see here. The tropical climates are the biomes that are found near the equator, which we've talked about before. That is a terrible line. Anyways, the equator. In this zone here, you receive more of the sun's direct rays more consistently, and so we have a warmer area, and a lot of times, normally, more humid. This is the wettest climate region, the tropical rainforest, dark pink, is the wettest climate region. It has warm temperatures that prevail and a lot of dense forests. There's heavy rains that leach or dissolve and carry away nutrients from the soil. Despite the rains leaching the soil, there's still a lot of different crops that are grown in a tropical rainforest region. Crops like bananas, pineapples, cocoa, tea, coffee, palms for oil, rubber, and cotton. You're going to see a lot of forestry also in the Congo River Basin in this rainforest type of climate. Now moving on to a savanna. A savanna is a tropical grassland with scattered trees. The savanna covers almost 50% of this continent. This picture is your light pink on this map. That's where your tropical savanna is, or your savanna. Rainfall here is seasonal. There's dueling winds that affect the savanna climate of Western Africa. You also have hot, dry air streams that come in from the Sahara on a northeast trade wind known as the Harmattan. Again, wind patterns and latitude is going to be what affects the climate the most. And then we move on to our dry climates. One is the steppe. Steppe separates the savanna from the desert. It's a steppe from the desert to the tropical grassland. The northern steppe in this region here is known as the Sahel. And we talked a little bit about this in the last unit, but that's this northern steppe region. It is known as the Sahel. It literally means shore or edge in Arabic. This is your edge of the Sahara Desert. Now, we've talked about this in the previous unit as well, but desertification is going on in the Sahel. This is where land turns into desert because of the destruction of vegetation. Because of what people are doing to the land, this area is turning more and more into a desert. The Sahara Desert is growing, and the Sahel region is shifting, and we're losing a lot of our other climate regions. And then we have the desert climate zone, which is there's still quite a bit of desert climate zone here. We've got several deserts in this region. I'm going to go back. We have the Namib Desert, which you could see located there in the southern region, and then the Kalahari, which I kind of covered up, also located in this area. Now, there is one thing that I do want to point out to you, and you can see that here on this map a little bit, and then we'll move on to the vegetation zone map. But Africa, sub-Saharan Africa more specifically, is like a mirror. It mirrors the equator. If you took this equator line just directly below and above it, even though I don't have that color, you've got tropical rainforest. Then just directly above and below that, you've got tropical savanna. And then just directly above that, you've got steppe. And then directly above that, you've got your desert. All right? So it's like a mirror. And if we were to extend this mirror through northern Africa, it would keep going. Because at my far, far southern tip in this zone, I actually have Mediterranean-type climates. And at the far, far northern point of Africa, I've got some Mediterranean climates. this is just like a mirror, and the climate system can be compared to this. The vegetation looks very similar to the climate. We got a lot of tropical forest in this zone. We got a lot of tropical grasslands in this zone, and then from there we move on to desert scrub and the desert waste. Really, the only natural disaster that occurs in this region is drought, and that impacts us more and more because of desertification. The easiest way to remember what the climate and vegetation looks like is to watch The Lion King. I wish we had time to watch the whole movie because it is really good. Other than the climate and vegetation, it really doesn't have anything to do with our unit. But I feel like it's a pretty good movie and it fits this zone. So when you're trying to imagine what this area looks like, especially the Sahel and your tropical savanna type of areas, just think of The Lion King.